Hi again. We've reached chapter 17 of John Stott's commentary on Acts. Paul on trial. This deals with chapter 24 right through to chapter 26, verse 32. Jerusalem and Rome were the centers of two enormously strong power blocks. The faith of Jerusalem went back 2 millennia to Abraham. The rule of Rome extended some 3 million square miles around the Mediterranean Sea. Jerusalem's strength lay in history and tradition, Rome's in conquest and organization. The combined might of Jerusalem and Rome was overwhelming. If a solitary dissident like Paul were to set himself against them, the outcome would be inevitable. His chances of survival would resemble those of a butterfly before a steamroller. He would be crushed, utterly obliterated from the face of the earth. Yet such an outcome, we may confidently affirm, never even entered Paul's mind as a possibility, for he saw his situation from an entirely different perspective. He was no traitor to either church or state, that he should come into collision with them, although this is how his accusers tried to frame him. The enemies of Jesus had followed the same ploy. In their own court, they had accused him of threatening to destroy the temple and of blaspheming, while before Pilate they had represented him as guilty of sedition, subverting the nation, opposing taxes to Caesar, and claiming to be himself a king. Now Paul's enemies laid similar charges against him, namely that he had offended against the law of the Jews, against the temple, and against Caesar, according to 25:7 and 8. But Paul was as innocent in these areas as Jesus had been. He had no quarrel with the God-given status of either Rome or Jerusalem. On the contrary, as he had written to the Roman Christians, he recognized that the authority given to Rome came from God, and that the privileges given to Israel came from God also. The gospel did not undermine the law, whether Jewish or Roman, but rather upheld it. To be sure, the Romans might misuse their God-given authority, and the Jews might represent their law as the means to salvation. In such situations, Paul would oppose them. But that was not the issue now. Paul's contention, while on trial, was that in principle the gospel both supports the rule of Caesar and fulfills the hope of Israel. His defense before his judges was to present himself as a loyal citizen of Rome and a loyal son of Israel. Paul's double denial of treason and double insistence on loyalty is the thread which runs through these chapters. So far he has defended himself before a Jewish crowd and the Sanhedrin. Now he will stand trial before the Procurator Felix, the Procurator Festus, and King Agrippa II. In each of these 5 trials, in which the charge was now political sedition, now religious sacrilege, the judging audience was part Roman and part Jewish. Thus when Paul spoke to the Jewish crowd and the Jewish council, Claudius Lysias, the Roman tribune, was present and listening, while when Paul stood before Felix and Festus, the representatives of Rome, it was the Jews who were prosecuting. Then, in the 5th trial, which was the grand finale, King Agrippa II combined both authorities within himself, for he had been appointed by Rome, but was also an acknowledged authority on Jewish affairs. Paul before Felix. At the end of the previous chapter, Felix, having read the letter from Claudius Lysias, sent to Jerusalem for Paul's accusers and meanwhile kept him in custody in Caesarea. 5 days later, dating presumably from Paul's arrival, the high priest Ananias responded to the procurator's summons and went down to Caesarea with some of the elders and a lawyer named Tertullus. As soon as the court convened, they brought their charges against Paul before the governor. Whether they made their accusations in speech or in writing, we're not told. But after the procurator had received them, Paul was called in, and Tertullus presented his case before Felix, or opened for the prosecution. The Jerusalem Bible renders it that way. As a trained and experienced professional lawyer, Tertullus began with what was called a captatio benevolentiae. My Latin is a little rusty. That is, an endeavor to capture the judge's goodwill. Traditionally, it was complementary to the point of hypocrisy and often included a promise of brevity. But on this occasion, it descended to almost nauseating flattery, for Tertullus expressed gratitude for the peace Felix had secured and the reforms he had introduced, whereas in reality he had put down several insurrections with such barbarous brutality that he earned for himself the horror, not the thanks, of the Jewish population. Here are Tertullus's words: "We have enjoyed a long period of peace under you, and your foresight has brought about reforms in this nation, everywhere and in every way, most excellent Felix. We acknowledge this with profound gratitude. But in order not to weary you further, I would request that you be kind enough to hear us briefly." Tertullus went on to enumerate 3 charges against Paul. First, we have found this man to be a troublemaker. The New English Bible puts it, a perfect pest, stirring up riots among the Jews all over the world. This was a serious accusation because of its political overtones. There were many Jewish agitators at that time, messianic pretenders who threatened the very peace which Tertullus had attributed to Felix. Secondly, Tertullus continued, Paul is a ringleader of the Nazarene sect. The word heresy meant sect, party, school, and was applied to both the Sadducees, that is in 5:17, and the Pharisees in 15 verse 5, as traditions within Judaism. It is in this sense that it is now used by Christians. It had not yet come to mean heresy, although its use in this chapter and its recurrence in 28:22 incline towards the rendering heretical sects. The third charge against Paul was that he even tried to desecrate the temple, a reference to the belief that he had brought Trophimus and the Ephesian within the prohibited precinct. This was a particularly damaging and dangerous accusation because the Romans had given the Jews wide powers in dealing with offenses against their temple. "So we seized him," said Tertullus in a dishonest euphemism for the Jews' attempts to lynch him. The Western reading then adds in verses 6b to 8a, which Authorized Version and Jerusalem Bible include in their text, but NIV relegates to the margin. And this is the section that's been added in some of the texts. Quote, "And wanted to judge him according to our law, but the commander, Lysias, came and with the use of much force snatched him from our hands and ordered his accusers to come before you." End of quote. The effect of this addition is to complete the reversal of the facts, attributing the violence to Lysias instead of to the Jewish crowd, as the orderly arrest had been ascribed to the crowd instead of to Lysias. Tertullus concluded his prosecution with a direct appeal to Felix. By examining him yourself, you will be able to learn the truth about all these charges we are bringing against him. When he had finished, the Jews joined in the accusation, asserting that these things were true. Next time we'll hear Paul's defense. I put in a link to a commentary we did on these events that are recorded here, or these accusations that are made against Paul. Did he indeed violate the sanctuary back in chapter 21? The Jews slander Paul is the name of the video. Who do Jehovah's Witnesses slander?